Today is finally April 1st. Yay! Happy Wednesday. And I'm feeling really good today. I know it's day 14 of missing my kiddos, but I'm feeling really good because I got to do my first Zoom with at least 7 of you, or I think it was 7. Yeah, and so thank you to Edwida, Santana, Kinsley, Faith, Devin, Jackson, and Madison for all coming to do the Zoom session with me today. Well, not coming, I guess, because you were just on your computer, but I'm excited. So, parents, if you're watching and you didn't get a chance to do the Zoom today, go to my email, lmackenzie-miller@turlock.k12.ca.us. Please make sure you're spelling Mackenzie correctly, Mackenzie. And yes, there is a hyphen in there. So email me and I will send you the link. We decided we would like to do Zoom again next Wednesday at 11. So it was exciting. All right. And I'm still reading Henry and the Paper Route by Beverly Cleary. We're on chapter 5. And again, I don't own the rights to these books, but these authors are amazing and they need to be shared. So Beverly Cleary, I know you're still alive. She's 103 now. So I didn't get your permission, but I hope you are willing to let me do this during this time because I'm only doing it for my students. Okay. All right. Henry's new neighbor. Ooh, how exciting. Not long after the paper drive, a day arrived that Henry had been looking forward to for a long, long time. That day was Henry's 11th birthday. This year, his birthday fell on Saturday, so it was extra special. Mrs. Huggins invited 8 boys from Henry's class for lunch, and Henry received 3 flashlights. It didn't matter. A boy could always find a use for another flashlight. 2 packages of stamps to add to his collection, 1 model airplane kit, and 2 puzzles. After a lunch of tamales, yum, milk, and a green salad because Mrs. Huggins thought boys should eat vegetables, and an orange ice cream cake, with 11 candles set in whipped cream frosting, the boys entertained themselves by practicing artificial respiration on each other. Then, after Mrs. Huggins had cleared off the table, she drove them to the neighborhood theater where they saw 17 Bugs Bunny cartoons, one right after the other. So I want to show you the picture. Has anyone seen Bugs Bunny cartoons? I think a few of you have. What's really cool is even though this book was written in the 50s, they still show these cartoons today, so that's kind of cool. Henry enjoyed every minute of his birthday. He laughed when Bugs Bunny was Robin Hood, outwitting the sheriff of Nottingham. He howled when Bugs Bunny escaped from the hunter, who wanted to make him into rabbit stew. He shouted when Bugs Bunny switched places with a circus ringmaster who was trying to make him dive off a high diving board into a bucket of water. And all the time, Henry was thinking, I am 11 years old enough to have a paper route, if I could get one. The boys walked home from the movie, and when Henry and Robert, who lived near one another, came to the house the Pumphreys had lived in, they saw furniture being carried into the house from a moving van. Naturally, they stopped to watch. Henry was a little disappointed because the furniture of the new neighbors was not more interesting. They owned the usual things: beds, chairs, a stove, a TV set. Hey, look! Exclaimed Robert, pointing. A bike! A boy's bike, added Henry in excitement. I wonder what grade he's in. Maybe he'll be in our room, said Robert. It was a regular-sized bike. You know what would be a good idea? Said Henry eagerly as the 2 boys started toward home. Maybe the 3 of us, you and me and this new fellow, could get a bunch of wire and stuff and rig up a telephone system. Of course, to connect it with his house, he would have to string the wires over some fences and through some trees, but I bet it would work. Hey, that's a swell idea, agreed Robert enthusiastically. We could phone each other anytime we wanted to. Sure, said Henry. It would be our own private line. I bet we can find some books at the library that would tell us how to do it. I wonder when we'll get to meet him, said Robert. Soon, I hope, answered Henry. It's going to be fun having a new boy around. On Sunday, Henry found several excuses to ride his bicycle past the new boy's house, but he saw no one. Monday, after school, he noticed curtains at the windows, but still he did not see a boy. When Henry got home, he had nothing special to do, so he tied a piece of cellophane to the end of a string, and he dragged it across the rug for Nosy to pounce on, while he wondered what the new boy would be like. Nosy, as Mr. Huggins had predicted, was rapidly growing up to be a cat. Right now, he was too big to be a kitten, but still not quite big enough to be a cat. Nosy crouched, lashed his tail, and pounced. With the cellophane in his claws, he rolled over on his back and kicked at his prey with his hind feet, while Ribsy lay watching the game. The phone rang and Mrs. Huggins answered it. "Hello?" Henry heard his mother say. "Oh, hello, Eva." Eva, Henry knew, was Scooter's mother. Mrs. McCarthy and Mrs. Huggins often had really long, boring conversations over the phone. "Oh, dear," Henry heard his mother say. "That's too bad." What's too bad, wondered Henry idly, as he took the cellophane away from Nosy and held it up for the little cat or a big kitten to jump for. "Oh, I'm really glad Henry's been through that already," said Mrs. Huggins. Now, what could I have been through? Henry asked himself, but he couldn't think of anything he'd been through except kindergarten and the first 4 grades. He did not think his mother and Mrs. McCarthy would be talking about anything like that. "Oh, I wouldn't worry, Eva. It wasn't too bad," said Mrs. Huggins. "But then, of course, Scooter is older." Well, maybe Scooter is older than I am, thought Henry, jerking the cellophane free from Nosy's claws. "But I am 11 years old now." "Well, you know how boys are," said Mrs. Huggins. Henry's interest in the conversation increased. If his mother started talking about how boys were, she might say something he'd like to hear. He stopped twirling the cellophane and he sat down to listen. Wow, he's eavesdropping, isn't he? Mrs. Huggins laughed again. "I think that is too funny for words," she said. Henry became impatient. He hoped it wasn't something bad that he had done that was too funny for words. He didn't want people laughing at him. Mrs. Huggins listened for a really long time, and finally she said, "I don't know, Eva. I think he's a little young." "Who's a little young for what?" Henry was growing more and more impatient. If his mother was talking about his being too young for something, she was probably saying he could not do something he would like to do. Somehow the things his parents thought he was not old enough to do were always the things he wanted to do most of all. On the chance that his mother was talking about him, Henry went into the kitchen and said in a really loud whisper, "I am not too young." Mrs. Huggins motioned him away and went on talking. "But Eva, for one thing, they weigh so much on Sunday." What? This baffled Henry. Why wouldn't a thing weigh the same on Sunday as it did on weekdays? His mother's conversation did not make any sense. People certainly didn't weigh more on Sunday unless they ate a lot of apple pie or something. What do you guys think she's talking about? You think you've got it? Wait a minute, he thought suddenly. Newspapers! Newspapers weighed more on Sunday. No, that couldn't be it. Yes, it could. His mother must be talking about his delivering papers. No, that couldn't be what she was talking about because Scooter was still mad at him because of the paper drive. "Mom!" Henry whispered urgently. Mrs. Huggins put her hand over the mouthpiece of the phone. "Henry," she said, "I'm trying to carry on a conversation. Please stop interrupting." "But Mom!" Mrs. Huggins gave Henry a look that told him she meant what she said. "Ugh!" muttered Henry, and went back into the living room where he picked up Nosy and rubbed the fur on the sides of the kitten's little black face while he hung on every word his mother said. And there she is on the phone, and no, she's not on the toilet. Every year kids see this picture, they're all, "She's on the toilet." No, she's not. It's a little cushion, and there must be some kind of bookcase behind her, but it kind of does look like a fancy toilet. But you don't have a toilet in your living room, right? So we're good. "All right, Eva," said Mrs. Huggins at last. "He's been dying to for weeks." But Mrs. Huggins did not hang up. "By the way, Eva," she went on, "I'm in charge of the refreshment committee of the PTA this year, and I wondered if you knew of a bakery." "Ah!" Henry groaned loud enough for his mother to hear, but sorry, Sophie, I scared my dog. But she paid no attention. "That makes a good and inexpensive cake. I thought it would be like a big flat cake and have it iced and decorated with a few rosebuds." "Oh no, not a rosebud for every member of the PTA. That would be too expensive. But just enough rosebuds to make it look pretty until we cut it." Rosebuds for the PTA? Hello? At a time like this? Henry drove his fist into a cushion to work off some of his impatience. When Mrs. Huggins at last ended the conversation, Henry dropped Nosy and sprang to his feet. "What does she want, Mom? What does she want?" "Henry, when I am talking on the phone, I do not like to be interrupted," said Mrs. Huggins. "Okay, Mom," agreed Henry hastily. "But what did she want?" "Scooter has come down with chicken pox," began Mrs. Huggins. "Ha! Old Scoot has the chicken pox!" exclaimed Henry, as if he couldn't believe it. "In the 7th grade? Ha! I had that when I was a little kid." Well, what do you know, thought Henry. For once, he was ahead of Scooter on something. Yes, he has the chicken pox, Mrs. Huggins went on, and he wants you to take his route until he can go back to school. Scooter wants me to take his route? This was too much for Henry to believe. If his mother had said Mrs. McCarthy had wanted him to take the route, he could believe it, but not Scooter. Yes, it seems that he was embarrassed to ask you himself because of some sort of disagreement you two had. Mrs. Huggins looked amused as she spoke. So he asked his mother to call me about it. He wants you to take his route because he knows you can do it, but he's afraid you're mad at him. Maybe Henry had been mad at Scooter, but now that Scooter was sure Henry could do a good job delivering papers, the whole quarrel suddenly seemed unimportant. Just a silly argument a long time ago. Me? Mad at Scooter? Henry said, as if he had never heard of such a thing. When do I start? Today, said his mother. You'd better go over to Scooter's house and get the route book right now. Henry had his hand on the doorknob before his mother had even finished speaking. Say, Mom, how long does chickenpox last? He asked. About 2 weeks at Scooter's age, answered Mrs. Huggins. So I had chickenpox when I was little. You guys don't have to worry about that because now they have some kind of shot for it. But when I was little, I had it, but it wasn't bad. And then I think it was only about 4 or 5 days that I had it. 2 weeks? 2 whole weeks of delivering papers? And he was 11 years old besides. Wow, Henry did not take time to walk down the front steps. He jumped. The other boys had already begun to fold papers by the time Henry had picked up Scooter's route book and canvas bag and joined them. Hi, said Henry briefly. Mr. Capper, I'm taking Scooter's route while he has the chicken pox. Henry found the bundles of paper and began to count them. Hey, we haven't seen you around for a long time, said Mr. Capper. Do you think you can handle it all right? Sure I can, answered Henry and hesitated. Mr. Capper? I'm 11 years old now. Mr. Capper grinned. No kidding? Asked Chuck, one of the carriers who went to high school. Are you really 11? Sure, boasted Henry. You didn't think I was going to stay 10 my whole life, did you? Hey, if he's 11, said Chuck to Mr. Capper, maybe he could take over my route. Henry paused in his paper folding long enough to ask questioningly, or to look questioningly at the older boy. What for? He asked, suspecting a joke. I want to go out for basketball practice in a couple of weeks, said Chuck. Satisfied that Chuck was not teasing him, Henry looked expectantly at Mr. Capper, who only smiled and said, we'll see. Mr. Capper had not made any promises, thought Henry, as he stuffed the last journal into the bag, but he did not think he had anything to worry about. He knew he could handle the route, and that Mr. Capper knew he wanted it. Feeling that this time there was nothing to stand in his way, Henry set off to deliver the papers with a light heart. Henry finished the route by 5:30 and decided to go home by way of the Pumphrey house. He might catch a glimpse of the new boy. Sure enough, on the driveway beside the house, a strange boy was unpacking a carton that was filled with coils of wire, batteries, and what looked like radio tubes. He was about Henry's age, or maybe a year older, a tall, thin boy, slightly stooped, who wore glasses. You want to see his picture? There's the new boy. Henry rode partway up the driveway. Hi, he said, eager to be friendly. Are you the new boy? Yep, answered the boy. Henry felt this didn't tell him much. He studied the new boy a moment and decided that he probably was not much of a baseball player, but that didn't matter. There were plenty of boys in the neighborhood who did play ball. My name is Henry Huggins, Henry said. I live on the other side of the block on Klickitat Street. The boy was so busy untangling some copper wire that he did not even bother to answer. Henry felt the conversation was getting no place. This was not the way he had pictured making friends with his new neighbor. Then an old fat dog wandered out of the backyard. Remember, we don't use the word fat when we're talking about people, but you can with dogs. He looked something like a fox terrier, only much bigger and tougher, as if he might be part bulldog. Henry brightened. Boys always like to talk about their dogs. Hey, what's your dog's name? He asked. Tiger, answered the boy briefly, as the tired-looking dog flopped down beside him. Tiger? Exclaimed Henry. You can't call a dog Tiger. That's a name for cats. For the first time, the boy put down his wire and looked at Henry through his glasses. Why? He asked. Henry was taken aback. Man, making friends with this boy was not going to be easy. Well, I suppose you can, he admitted, because the boy obviously did call his dog Tiger. What I mean is, well, people usually call dogs Major or Guard or Spot or something like that. What's your name? Henry asked, both to change the subject and because he wanted to know. Byron Murphy, answered the boy. Call me Murph. Okay, Murph, agreed Henry, pleased to have made this much progress in the conversation. He looked at the jumble of wires in Murph's carton and concluded that the new boy must be interested in electricity. And any boy interested in electricity should be glad to help rig up a private phone line. Say, Murph, Henry began enthusiastically, I've got a swell idea. Why don't we get together with my friend Robert, and the three of us can rig up our own private telephone line between our houses. We can do it by stringing wires over fences and through the trees. Then we could talk to each other anytime we wanted. We'd have a lot of fun. He looked expectantly at Murph. Murph went on untangling his wire. Why couldn't we just call each other on the phone? He asked. Henry stared at Murph as if he could not believe what he had heard. You mean on the regular phone? The one that belongs to the phone company? Sure, said Murph. Henry felt like a balloon with the air let out. Well, I guess we could, he admitted. Man, Murph was probably right. It would be foolish to buy parts and go to a lot of work to build a phone system that probably wouldn't work very well when they already had telephones that did work. But couldn't Murph see that a private phone system would be fun? What kind of a fellow was this Murph? Anyway, said Murph, I'm pretty busy building my robot. Well, there was one thing about Murph. Almost everything he said was a surprise. You mean you're building a mechanical man? Henry asked incredulously. By now, he was completely bewildered by Murph. Well, he might have expected something like this. A boy who would name a dog Tiger would probably do most anything. Sure, said Murph, and he pulled a 5-gallon oil can out of a carton. On top of the can was an old tomato sauce can, which supported a larger tin can, which Henry could see was supposed to be the robot's head. Hey, if you put a funnel upside down on his head, he would look like the Tin Woodman in The Wizard of Oz, offered Henry helpfully. He was beginning to think that this boy had interesting possibilities, even if he was a little peculiar. This isn't any Tin Woodman? Murph sounded annoyed. This is a robot. Want to see the picture? This is not done, but this is what he's thinking. This is the body of the robot, his neck, and this is his head. But of course, it's just the beginning stages. Henry felt that Murph thought he wasn't very bright because he had compared his robot to a character in a fairy tale. Wait, you mean you really expect it to work? He asked cautiously. Sure, said Murph. I've got it all figured out with batteries and magnets and stuff. I may even put a phonograph inside so he'll talk. Phonograph is like an old record player. This was too much for Henry. Murph must be practically a genius. A mechanical man that could talk? There was going to be a lot of excitement in the neighborhood when this news got around. Henry stared at the new boy and his invention until he summoned up enough courage to speak again. What's the hole in his back for? He asked. That's where his insides go, explained Murph. Oh. Henry felt he should have been able to see that without asking. It was some time before he got up courage to speak again. He didn't want to risk any more foolish questions, so he asked, What are you going to call him? That should be a good, safe question. Thorvo, answered Murph. Ooh, that's a good name, agreed Henry, feeling that Thorvo had an interesting outer space sound appropriate for a robot. He waited hopefully, but Murph seemed too busy to talk. Well, I guess I better be going, he said finally. Then in one last attempt to be neighborly, he added, If you ever feel like a game of checkers, I live in that white house around on Klickitat Street. Checkers? Repeated Murph absently. I haven't played checkers for a long time, not since I learned how to play chess. Oh, well, that settled it as far as Henry was concerned. Murph was a genius, a real brain. Chess at his age? Everyone knew chess was a game played by wise old men with beards. No wonder he was serious and didn't say much. His mind was full of big, important things. So long, Murph, said Henry, unable to keep the awe out of his voice. It must be wonderful to be a genius instead of an ordinary checker-playing boy. Murph could probably do anything he wanted to. If he needed something, all he had to do was invent it. And to think he was going to live right here in the neighborhood. Henry was sure he had not made a very good impression on Murph with his remarks about Thorvo looking like the Tin Woodman and his invitation to play an easy game like checkers. He hoped Murph would not think he was too dumb to associate with. Henry was anxious to watch the construction of Thorvo. There had never been anything like Thorvo in the neighborhood in all the time he could remember. He searched for something to say that would show Murph that he wasn't so dumb after all. "I'll see you around," he said finally. "I'm pretty busy after school delivering newspapers." That ought to show Murph he wasn't so dumb. A boy with a paper route was pretty important. "A route takes a lot of time," agreed Murph, showing more interest than he had in anything Henry had said so far. "Yeah, I'm substituting for a couple of weeks," said Henry, glad of the opportunity to talk about his work for a change. Then one of the carriers is quitting, and I expect I'll get his route." Instantly, Henry was sorry he had spoken. Maybe this new boy was looking for a route too. "So long," he said hastily, and coasted down the driveway. Now I've gone and done it, thought Henry as he rode home. Here he practically had a route of his own, and then he had to go and let this new boy, this brain, know that a carrier was giving up his route. How dumb can I get? Henry asked himself in disgust. Now Murph would probably go after the route, and what chance did Henry have against a brain who went around playing chess and inventing a robot named Thorvo? Not a chance, Henry decided, not a chance at all. Murph would probably not only get the route, he would build a mechanical man to deliver the newspapers for him. Man. And that is the new neighbor, Murph. And chapter 6, next time, Ramona takes over. Well, I'm very curious about that. All right, once again, if your parents have not contacted me through email, please do, and I will send you a link. And I think that's it. Keep staying safe. I love you guys. We'll just see what happens as we keep going. At least we're in a new month. I'm grateful for that. I got tired of March. So at least we're in a new month, and hopefully, fingers crossed, we only have 1 month more before we get to see each other again officially. All right, love you guys. Take care. Bye.